Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome into the Stone Zone. Well, for you political junkies out there, here's a big story. President Donald Trump has now officially endorsed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton for the U.S. Senate in the Lone Star State, calling him an American first patriot, a loyal MAGA warrior, and a proven winner. In a Truth Social post, President Trump praised Paxton as someone who has stood with him and the MAGA movement through difficult political battles. He said Paxton has been tested at the highest levels and knows how to win. Trump contrasted Paxton with the incumbent Republican U.S. Senator John Cornyn, calling Cornyn a good man, but saying he wasn't supportive when times were tough, and was late to back President Trump during his historic comeback for both the Republican nomination and the White House. In truth, Cornyn has been among those senators with the lowest level of support for this president. Now, two of the very best political operatives and minds in America, Chris LaCivita and Tony Fabrizio, men I have enormous respect for, both working for Senator Cornyn, but putting all personalities aside, this endorsement by the president of Ken Paxton, the crusading attorney general, really should cinch the runoff, which comes up here very shortly. Texas has a system in which it has 2 rounds of primaries. The 2 top votes getters, if neither one of them gets 50% in the first round, face off, and that face off is imminent. The president highlighted Paxton's support for eliminating the filibuster and also advancing the Save America Act. That's the legislation that requires that one simply be a United States citizen and have photographic proof of it, a photo ID, in order to vote in the United States. President Trump warned that if Democrats regain power, they will eliminate the filibuster themselves, and Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico will become states, as well as they're trying, as FDR did, to pack the Supreme Court with radical left-wing justices. He said Paxton would fight to cut taxes and regulations, unleash American energy dominance, defend Texas oil and gas industries, support farmers and ranchers, promote school choice, secure the border, stop migrant crime, protect elections, and support veterans, as well as defending the Second Amendment. I can't overstate how powerful President Donald Trump's endorsement is within the Republican primary. I worked for Ronald Reagan in 3 separate presidential campaigns, and although Reagan was extraordinarily popular, his endorsement never packed the kind of political punch that Donald Trump's endorsement does. Trump has a 95% win rate in Republican primaries, and in this particular case, I believe Paxton may have been nominally ahead in what was going to be a very close race. This, I think, allows Paxton to win in a runaway election, a runaway runoff. President Trump also praised Paxton for the enduring unfair attacks and continuing to fight. He, too, has been the target of a phony impeachment in Texas, which was completely fabricated by the Bush wing of the Republican Party. This should be the final death blow to Cornyn, one of the most despicable rhinos in the entire Senate. He will soon be retired after the political establishment spent over $100 million in trying to prop him up. That is the National Republican Senatorial Committee's incumbent fund. That money could have gone to getting America First Republicans elected in this year's general election in other states. Instead, it sadly has been squandered by the rhinos, and that should not be forgiven or, in my opinion, forgotten. In the end, Ken Paxton will come out on top with the endorsement of Donald Trump, and when he's elected, he will be perhaps the greatest MAGA fighter in the U.S. Senate. In more good news, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says the Justice Department is making great progress investigating the origins of the Russian collusion hoax, calling it a matter that did great damage to the country and to President Trump's first term. And he says it will not be swept under the rug during his watch. Appearing on Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures program, Blanche told Maria Bartiromo that there's no dispute that the Russian hoax was a complete and utter fraud. Actually, the documents declassified by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, over 350 days ago, indisputably proved that. Yet there are still those on social media who continue to insist that Russia interfered in our 2016 election, a claim for which there is no proof whatsoever. Blanche went on to say the real question is why officials in the outgoing Obama administration, including James Comey, pushed it anyway, knowing that all of the evidence was fabricated or false. Blanche confirmed that the Southern District of Florida has an open criminal investigation involving hundreds of subpoenas and hundreds of witnesses. He said investigators are examining whether the efforts to target Trump was one continuing conspiracy stretching from 2015 or 2016 through later actions, potentially including Mar-a-Lago. That is the operating legal theory that gets this case to the Southern District of Florida. In other words, although the conspiracy may have begun in the Oval Office in a meeting led by Barack Obama himself, in which the so-called Clinton plan to blame the outcome of the 2016 election on Russia, and then morphs into the Russian collusion hoax, then manifests itself in two phony impeachments. Once again, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has declassified the documents that prove definitively that the two cute little Vindman brothers in their little uniforms were lying, and that they were working with a quote-unquote whistleblower who was being coached by Congressman, now Senator, Adam Schiff. The whole thing was a fraud. The documents that prove that have now been declassified for the entire American public to see. That conspiracy continues into the theft of the 2020 election. Only yesterday, Acting Attorney General Blanche confirmed that that too was under investigation. And then, of course, there is the phony documents case. This is when they raided Mar-a-Lago. Until you've had the FBI go through your wife's underwear drawer, as I have, as Donald Trump has, you really can't understand the feeling of invasion, the feeling that your home has been invaded. It's an extraordinary feeling, but we now realize that what they were looking for was the proof of their crimes. Their fear was that Donald Trump had, quite legally under the Presidential Records Act, had kept proof of their massive crime. And that's what they wanted to get back. That's what the entire documents case was really about. By the way, just one more time, under the Presidential Documents Act, the President of the United States is allowed to possess or declassify any document at will simply by holding it in his hand. So the idea that Trump had somehow illegally or improperly held on to federal documents is a farce in itself. But at that point, the Biden administration's Arctic frost operation was in high gear. This was an extra-constitutional operation in which American citizens, like yours truly and many others who support the president, including senators, congressmen, other party leaders, other journalists, were literally spied on. Their emails being monitored, their cell phones being monitored, their text messages being monitored. It's interesting, in the interview that I saw, Bartiromo, who I think is one of the greatest journalists out there, pressed Acting Attorney General Blanche on why accountability has taken so long and whether the statute of limitations have expired. Blanche said that prosecutors are uncovering incredibly troubling things, but emphasized that the Department of Justice will not rush charges before the investigation is complete. This is the accountability fight that has been in the making for years. The Russia hoax crippled the first term of President Trump. It poisoned the public trust. It empowered the deep state. And it gave the corporate media years of fake scandal to exploit. Now the question is whether the people who have built, pushed and projected that operation will finally face consequences. Blanche says the Justice Department is focused, moving carefully and preparing to reveal what it finds when the time is right. This is of the utmost importance. Let me stress, however, that a seditious conspiracy, which is what I think took place here, has no statute of limitations. In other words, it can be prosecuted at any time. That's why I think the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, is wisely putting into place the evidence to prove that this was one ongoing seditious conspiracy. One could even argue that it continues up into this day, with John Brennan, the epically corrupt Islamic convert who was the CIA director and one of the major orchestrators of the Russian collusion hoax. Only days ago on MSNOW, they had to change their name because their credibility was so low, insisting that there were many professionals still in the intelligence agencies who were resisting this effort to hold people accountable. This guy never quits. Blanche says the Justice Department is focused, moving carefully, and prepared to reveal what it finds when the time is right. This is of the utmost importance. We cannot let this fall by the wayside. It's time for Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Rosenstein, McCabe, and the entire deep state cabal, including Barack Obama and Joe Biden himself, to do perp walks. This is not about retaliation and revenge. It is about accountability and justice. In the meantime, Iran has sent a new 14-point peace proposal to the United States through Pakistani mediators, but Tehran is still stubbornly refusing to cede its nuclear threat. Iranian state-linked media says the regime is demanding U.S. reparations for damage from Operation Epic Fury, the lifting of all sanctions, and the unfreezing of Iranian assets seized over terrorism-related activity. Reports also say that Tehran wants Israel to halt operations in Lebanon, wants U.S. forces to leave areas near Iran, and wants America to end its blockade of Iranian shipments near the Straits of Hormuz. What Iran apparently is not offering is assurances that it will end its nuclear program. Iranian officials continue to describe uranium enrichment as a national right and dismiss U.S. concerns about nuclear weapons. President Trump has already rejected an earlier Iranian offer as garbage and has made it clear his red line that there will be no deal unless Iran can never obtain nuclear weapons. Pardon me. President Trump has said he's prepared to resume strikes against Iran, but paused after Gulf leaders asked for more time to pursue a deal. He ordered U.S. forces to remain ready for a full-scale assault on a moment's notice if Iran refuses an acceptable agreement. Iran is not wise to continue to test this president's patience. He has shown that he is deadly serious by first taking out the supreme leader and much of the Iranian regime, including 40 of his key henchmen. The Iranians, in my opinion, are delusional to expect cash, sanctions relief, and strategic concessions while keeping their nuclear leverage. They're showing their arrogance, and it will come back to bite them, in my opinion. The time is running out, and if the Iranian regime does not realize that President Trump is the one holding the cards, they will be completely obliterated before long. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, where we join you 5 days a week to talk about news, history, style, politics, and occasionally we talk about food, my other favorite subject. Don't go away, because we'll be right back in the Stone Zone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate those warm words from Vice President J.D. Vance, a man for whom I have enormous respect. and who I think great things are yet to come. Vice President J.D. Vance now says the Justice Department is looking into Representative Ilhan Omar over long-running allegations of immigration fraud. During a Tuesday press briefing, the Daily Caller reporter Reagan Reese asked Vice President Vance whether he expects an indictment against Omar. Vance responded that claims surrounding Omar's marriage history appear fishy, but emphasized that everyone's entitled to equal justice under the law. He said the administration is investigating, reviewing the facts, and will prosecute if officials believe a crime occurred. Vance added that the matter is something the Justice Department is indeed carefully examining. The comments come about a month after Vance made stronger remarks on Benny Johnson's podcast, accusing Omar of committing immigration fraud, tying her to an alleged fraud within parts of the Somali community. Omar has repeatedly denied allegations that she married her own brother in order to illegally gain U.S. citizenship, despite all signs pointing to this being the case. After Vance's earlier comments, she dismisses the claims as a, quote, ridiculous lie, and accused Republicans of trying to distract from other issues. Omar may think that she's going to get some DEI pass to be above the law, which may have been the case when Joe Biden was in office, but is no longer the case in Donald Trump's America. A sitting member of Congress should not receive special protection because she's a Democrat or a minority or receives protection from their handmaidens in the mainstream media. The Justice Department should not show any leniency towards Omar. She should be held to the same standard as anyone else. It has also come out in recent weeks that Omar may have had knowledge about the extent of Somali fraud going on in Minnesota and actually helped to facilitate it. Now, this woman is a menace. It was a huge mistake to let her in America in the first place. It appears she came here illegally, and now that must be rectified. Omar and her family and her entire community should be sent back to where they belong, that is, the law. Yesterday, we revealed how she was well aware of the fraud going on in a meals program in Minnesota. What you see in Minnesota, this kind of social welfare fraud, is just the tip of the iceberg. Before it's all over, you will see that similar programs and similar fraud have taken place in Ohio, Washington State, California, New York, as well as Michigan and other states. For those who don't think this will be an issue in the 2026 election, I think you should guess again. It's particularly interesting to note that among those who traveled to China with President Trump was Elon Musk. Elon Musk was an extraordinarily beneficial force in the 2024 election. I expect him to be an extraordinarily important force in the 2026 elections as well. He and President Trump have clearly had a rapprochement, and the spending issue, the waste, fraud, and corruption issues, they motivate Elon Musk to open his wallet. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
Is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And you're diving headfirst right back into the deep end of the Stone Zone, where we bring you the political news 5 days a week. Well, President Donald Trump is demanding a Justice Department investigation after Maryland election officials admitted a massive mail-in ballot failure affecting hundreds of thousands of voters. Why do outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post, the Associated Press, CNN, MSNBC, and the others keep insisting that voter fraud in America is literally non-existent when there's so much evidence to the contrary? The Maryland State Board of Elections says a vendor error caused some voters to receive primary ballots listing the wrong party's candidates. Because officials cannot determine exactly which voters received which ballots, the state is reissuing mail-in ballots to roughly 400,000 voters who requested them before May 14th. The original ballots remain in circulation, though election officials are telling voters to destroy the first ballot and use the replacement. What a mess. President Trump blasted the situation on Truth Social, warning that the Maryland sent out hundreds of thousands of flawed ballots and is now sending replacement ballots while no one knows fully what will happen with the first batch. He said he'll ask the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to launch an immediate investigation. The Maryland Freedom Caucus, that's a small group of conservatives in the Maryland legislature, a very small group I might add, is also demanding action, calling for a federal audit of the state's voter rolls and warning that double ballots in circulation threaten the basic principle of one person, one vote. State officials say the mistake may affect only a small number of voters, but they're reissuing ballots out of caution. It should come as no surprise that they want to minimize their error and stop the Trump administration from digging deeper. They most particularly don't want anyone to examine their voter list to see whether in fact it's clean and whether the people on the voting list are actually alive, actually residents of Maryland, and are actually U.S. citizens. That's the last thing they want. This is yet another example of why mass mail-in voting should be banned. When ballots are mailed incorrectly, duplicated, and left floating around, that's exactly what opens the door to fraud. And Democrats are shameless when it comes to exploiting these types of loopholes. It's funny that acting Attorney General Bill Barr actually said that in an interview on CNN before he determined that there was no fraud in the 2020 election. Funny how they changed their tune. When ballots are mailed incorrectly, duplicated, and left floating out there, that opens the door. The Trump administration needs to continue pushing this matter until the scourge of mail-in voting can be eradicated in Maryland and across the country. The president's right. Election Day is exactly what it says. Election Day. The election should take place on one day. You should not be counting and new ballots found days, in some cases weeks after the election. And we need to return to all paper ballots. If France, a country that uses paper ballots, can count 38 paper ballots in one day, then surely we here in the United States can do the same. Paper ballots, no mail-in voting, absentee ballots only with a valid excuse, such as health, or if you can prove that you have to be out of town or out of the country on some legitimate business purpose, or you're in the service, absentee ballots would be appropriate. Otherwise, we should return to one-day elections and paper ballots. It's only common sense. The only thing I would add, of course, is photo IDs. You need a photo ID to buy a pack of cigarettes. You need a photo ID to get on an airplane. You need a photo ID in order to apply for welfare. You need a photo ID for so many basic functions. Why do they say that a requirement for a photo ID is racist? What's racist about it? Are you implying that people of color can't get a photo ID? That's absurd. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is demanding accountability after the Senate parliamentarian blocked a Republican plan to include $1 billion for a new White House ballroom in a reconciliation package. According to reports, President Trump has urged Senate Majority Leader John Thune to remove Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDowell, after she ruled that ballroom funding could not pass under the strict rules of budget reconciliation without meeting a 60-vote threshold. Republicans are using reconciliation to advance key funding priorities with a simple majority, including money for the Border Patrol and Immigrations and Custom Enforcement. But McDowell says the ballroom language as written did not qualify. Now let me point out that the Senate parliamentarian is elected by no one. She is hand-chosen by John Thune. John Thune, of course, is a longtime associate of Karl Rove and is anything but a MAGA Republican. Unsurprisingly, therefore, Thune says he will not fire the parliamentarian, arguing that both parties often get frustrated with the rulings during reconciliation battles. So, as usual, Thune is content with the status quo. Republican lawmakers are now working to rewrite the security-related language so it can survive parliamentarian review and remain in the bill. If anything, the attempted assassination at the White House Correspondents' Dinner only weeks ago demonstrates the need for the ballroom within the secure premises of the White House. But this fight is bigger than the ballroom. It's about whether unelected bureaucrats can derail the agenda that voters elected for. Republicans need to deliver. Democrats never hesitate to use every tool available when they hold power. I'm a perfect example of that. But when Trump pushes for his priorities, suddenly Washington's rule enforcers become sacred. After what happened during last week's, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where a terrorist attempted to take out the entire Trump cabinet, the White House ballroom can no longer wait. It's now a fundamental matter of national security. Get rid of this parliamentarian now and fund the ballroom. If I were the Senate Republicans, I would also dump John Thune. It's very clear to me that he lacks the will to pass the Save America Act. Now, the Save America Act is really not complicated. It would merely be a requirement that one be a U.S. citizen and have proof of it to be eligible to vote in a federal election. Seems rather simple, doesn't it? Well, it has 50 votes, and therefore with Vice President J.D. Vance to break a tie, it has 51. But John Thune, who the Senate Majority Leader, will not let it advance to a vote because it violates the traditional filibuster rule. Under the filibuster rule, 60 senators must favor bringing anything to a vote. If we had a 60-vote majority, that'd be one thing, but we don't. If we don't get rid of the filibuster, the Democrats very surely will. And when they do, you can look at them to pack the Supreme Court, as well as making D.C. a state, probably Puerto Rico as well. So I think that the parliamentarian needs to go, but so does Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Meanwhile, President Trump is expanding his TrumpRx.gov, adding more than 600 affordable generic drugs to the website, and nearly multiplying its offerings sevenfold. Speaking at the White House on Monday, President Trump said the move will help tens of millions of Americans find lower prescription prices. He emphasized that generic drugs often contain the same active ingredients, same dosage, and same effectiveness as brand name drugs, but cost only a fraction of the price. President Trump said that generics listed through TrumpRx.gov may be even cheaper than what patients pay out of pocket through insurance. The expanded site will include a new interactive map allowing Americans to actually compare prescription prices at local pharmacies. U.S. Chief Design Officer Joe Gebbia demonstrated the feature during the announcement, with Health and Human Service Secretary Robert F. Kennedy praising the president, saying that past presidents promised to lower drug prices, but only President Trump has actually delivered. Kennedy called the effort an extraordinary accomplishment and a gift to the American people. Cost Plus Drugs, co-founded by Mark Cuban, is partnering with the administration to bring generic medications into TrumpRx.gov. Cuban, who backed Kamala Harris in 2024, said cheaper drugs should not be a partisan issue because Republicans, Democrats, and independents all want lower drug prices. While politicians have talked for decades, President Trump is forcing the system to finally work for patients. It's bringing people from across the aisle together and showing that Big Pharma no longer has the iron grip on America's health system. This is another promise kept from President Trump, and one that will likely help millions of Americans save money on drugs that they need to alleviate their suffering and improve their lives immeasurably. Once more, President Trump has delivered. If you get a chance, go check it out. It is at TrumpRx.gov, and it is amazing. I compared the prices there with what I'm paying at my local drugstore, and it's not even close. You're listening to The Stone Zone, and I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for staying with us. Authorities have now identified 2 teenage suspects accused of carrying out the deadly attack at the Islamic Center in San Diego. Police say that 17-year-old Kane Clark and 18-year-old Caleb Vasquez opened fire Monday morning, killing 3 men before dying from apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds nearby. Among the victims was mosque security guard Amin Abdullah, who officials say played a critical role in preventing the attack from becoming even worse. He's being remembered as a hero. Law enforcement sources say anti-Islamic writings were found in the suspect's vehicle, and one of the firearms reportedly had hate speech written on it. Reports have also described Nazi-style markings found with the suspects, who they believed to be transgendered. This would not be surprising considering the rash of mass shooting by transgenders who are at war with society and God, with a frequent target of their rampages being Christian churches and schools, as well as mosques. Political violence, religious hatred, and attacks on houses of worship are being bred by the radical left. Transgender ideology is just one part of it. The far left demonizes President Trump and calls on for attacks against him and his supporters. Then they cheer on people like Luigi Mangione because they believe he targeted a capitalist CEO, and they espouse the kill the rich Marxist sentiment that has led to some of the most murderous government entities in world history. So I say, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, Jewish, a Hindu, Sikh, or any religious affiliation, or no religious affiliation at all, you need to realize that the radical left may have you in their sights. What happened at this mosque was a terrible tragedy, but we're all created in the image of God, and all of our lives have immense value. Unfortunately, those on the far left don't see it that way, and many innocent people are being put at great risk as a result of their nihilistic ideology. Meanwhile, the Republican National Chairman, Joe Gruder's good friend of mine, says Republicans are expanding their election integrity fight nationwide with 130 lawsuits now active across 32 states, with more on the way. Gruder said Democrats are trying to cheat every single day, forcing Republicans to respond with aggressive litigation, field staff, and legal oversight across the country. He said the RNC is bringing the hammer wherever is necessary to stop election abuses before ballots are cast and counted. This effort covers major election battles, including redistricting, voter roll integrity, mail-in voting, and the impact of mass illegal immigration. Gruder's warned that Democrats allowed millions of illegal aliens into the country and now are looking at ways to turn that chaos into political power. The Republican National Committee has already hired election integrity staff in 17 states and plans to keep expanding its legal operation through the 2026 midterms. President Trump has also promised to deploy an army of election lawyers to protect the vote and stop the steal before it happens. Once again, media outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Associated Press continue to insist that election fraud is incredibly rare in the United States. Yet I can point you to congressional districts across the country, some in California, some in Florida, where more people voted than are registered to vote. The answer is very simple. It is to empower the American electorate by enacting the Save America law, which very simply insists that one be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a federal election, and that one have a photo ID in order to approve it. Now, I do think the Republicans have been asleep at the wheel in past elections, but it is now clear that they've gotten the message and that election integrity cannot be an afterthought. So I salute Chairman Joe Gruders for this new effort. The left has spent decades manipulating rules, exploiting loopholes, weakening voter safeguards, and weaponizing the courts. Now, Republicans are finally fighting back early, everywhere, and with force. Senators who are not on board with the Save America Act should be targeted for elimination through the primary process, exactly what happened to Dr. Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, who is one of the first Senate incumbents to lose in American history, and I predict what is about to happen to Senator John Cornyn in Texas. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
It is a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone. This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. You know, I don't think most people realize it, but it is entirely possible that America could add 2 additional states. Under the Canadian Constitution, any province within Canada may withdraw from their union by a simple majority vote of the people. Two of the wealthiest when it comes to natural resources, as well as gas and oil, rare earth minerals, two of the wealthiest provinces, Saskatchewan and Alberta, have fledgling independence movements. The courts have sought to slow this down in the case of Alberta. Saskatchewan, which if anything is even smaller, more conservative, but every bit as wealthy, if not wealthier, in terms of natural resources than Alberta, also has a fledgling independence movement. Were those two states to become independent, they could then apply for membership in the United States. That would require the approval of the majority of the states. But were that to be the case, then America would extend all the way from the Canadian border to Alaska in one continuous landmass. You also would, in my opinion, elect 4 more Republican U.S. senators and perhaps a dozen more Republican congressmen. It is not outside the realm of actual legal possibility that Donald Trump or his successor could add the next 2 states. And then, of course, there is the question of Greenland. President Trump is now pushing for a strategic vote over future Chinese or Russian investments in Greenland. Reports have indicated that U.S., Danish, and Greenlandic officials have been holding quiet talks over a deal that would expand America's foothold on the Arctic island while blocking Beijing and Moscow from gaining access to its mineral wealth. Greenland is, in fact, rich in rare earth minerals, uranium, oil, and other critical minerals. These materials are vital for missiles, radar systems, fighter jets, electric vehicles, semiconductors, and next-generation communications. China currently dominates the global rare earth supply chain, producing about 70% of the world's supply and controlling roughly 90% of processing capacity. That gives Beijing enormous leverage, especially if conflict erupts over Taiwan. President Trump's demand would prevent Chinese-linked firms from brokering major infrastructure and resource deals in Greenland. Trump administration rightly sees the island as a strategic reserve in case China weaponizes mineral exports. The talks also include expanding America's military presence in Iceland, potentially with new bases under an updated 1951 defense agreement with Denmark. This is exactly what an America First strategy looks like. President Trump understands that national power is not just limited to troops and tariffs, it's also supply chains, minerals, energy, bases, and denying Communist China control over resources that fuel modern warfare. The stakes over Greenland are enormous. By the way, every president, starting with Dwight Eisenhower, have thought that Greenland should be part of the United States, and President Trump must continue putting pressure to ensure that China and Russia don't gain ground in the Arctic in the meantime. This must culminate in the United States ultimately taking control of Greenland, as President Trump can offer the people a much better deal than the Danish, who can't even come close to either giving them the resources they need or defending them. And of course, Greenland stands within a crucial waterway should America be attacked by Russian submarines. So the president's desire for Greenland is not just expansionism or jingoism. There's a real strategic interest in our obtaining Greenland. And I'm hopeful that we'll add 2 more states out of Canada, Saskatchewan and Alberta. They would be welcome to be the next 2 United States. I'm Roger Stone. You heard it here first on the Stone Zone. Thanks for joining us here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.